Have you ever noticed that the men everyone seems to chase are often the ones who don't chase anyone at all? It sounds backwards. Society tells you that if you want respect, friendship, or attraction, you need to be available. Answer every message, attend every gathering, explain yourself, stay visible. But what if that's exactly why so many men lose their value? Most men never realize this. The more available you become, the more predictable you become. And once people believe you'll always be there, many begin to treat your presence like background noise instead of something meaningful. Now, this isn't about playing games, it's about understanding one of the most misunderstood principles of human psychology. And what happens next may surprise you, because disappearing quietly, without anger, without announcements, without drama, can reveal more about the people around you than years of conversation ever could. The strange part? People often don't appreciate your presence until they experience your absence. Think about the last person who suddenly stopped calling, stopped posting, or quietly stepped away from everyone's attention. Didn't people immediately start asking questions? Where did he go? Is everything okay? Why hasn't he been around? The silence became louder than all the conversations before it. But here's where it gets interesting. This reaction isn't just curiosity, it's deeply rooted in psychology. Human beings naturally assign greater value to what becomes less accessible. It's one reason limited opportunities seem more desirable than unlimited ones. Scarcity changes perception, not because the object itself changed, but because people's minds did. The same principle quietly influences relationships, whether it's friendships, family, colleagues, or romantic interest. Constant availability often creates invisible familiarity, and familiarity, when taken for granted, slowly weakens appreciation. Pay close attention because this changes everything. Many men believe disappearing means giving someone the silent treatment. That's not what we're talking about. There's a massive difference. One comes from emotional manipulation, the other comes from emotional independence. A manipulative man disappears, hoping someone panics. A confident man disappears because he's genuinely focused on building a life that doesn't revolve around other people's attention. The outside behavior may look similar. The psychology behind it couldn't be more different. And people, especially emotionally intelligent people, can often sense the difference without a single word being spoken. Imagine two men after a relationship ends. The first constantly checks her social media, sends messages looking for closure, asks mutual friends what she's doing, and tries to stay visible in every possible way. The second says very little. He doesn't announce he's leaving. He doesn't post motivational quotes every day. He doesn't try to make anyone jealous. He simply disappears into his own mission. Months later, which man appears stronger? Which one seems harder to replace? Which one creates genuine curiosity? Not because he planned it, but because his life continued moving forward. This is why many psychologists describe absence as a powerful mirror. It doesn't change people, it reveals them. Some will never notice you're gone. Some will suddenly realize how much space you filled. Others will begin imagining stories because your silence leaves room for their own thoughts. And here's the fascinating part. The human mind often fills unanswered questions with emotion. That's why silence frequently speaks louder than explanations. Most men spend years trying to convince people of their value through words. Very few realize that value often becomes visible only after they stop trying to prove it. But don't misunderstand this principle. Quietly disappearing isn't always the right move. In fact, if you disappear for the wrong reason, it can destroy relationships instead of strengthening your life. So, how do you know the difference? And why does this strategy affect women, friends, and even people who claimed they didn't care about you in completely different ways? The answer lies in a psychological principle that most men overlook, and once you understand it, you'll never look at attention, attraction, or respect the same way again. Here's something that seems unfair at first. The harder you try to stay in someone's mind, the easier it is for them to stop noticing you. Yet the moment you quietly step back, something unusual begins to happen. People start thinking about you without you saying a single word. Most men never realize this. The human brain isn't designed to obsess over what it fully understands. It obsesses over what feels incomplete. Psychologists sometimes call this the unfinished loop. When a story suddenly stops, the mind naturally wants to know how it ends. That's why a conversation that ends unexpectedly is often remembered longer than one that finishes perfectly. The same thing happens in relationships. Imagine two friends. One sends messages every single day, always checking in, always available, always asking what everyone else wants to do. At first, people appreciate him, but over time, his attention becomes expected rather than valued. Then there's another man. He's warm when he's present, but he doesn't constantly seek validation. If he's busy building his business, improving his health, or simply enjoying his own life, he disappears for a while without making an announcement. Weeks later, people begin asking about him. Have you heard from him? I wonder what he's been doing. Notice the difference. Neither man asked for attention, but only one created curiosity. But here's where it gets interesting. Women often respond to this principle differently than men. Many men believe attraction grows through constant communication. While communication is important in healthy relationships, constant reassurance before trust is established can sometimes reduce mystery instead of increasing connection. Imagine you've just started dating someone. Every hour you send another text. Good morning. What are you doing? Did you see my message? Are you okay? On the surface, it looks like interest. Underneath, it can communicate something else entirely. It tells the other person that your emotional state depends on their response. Confidence works differently. A confident man enjoys the conversation, but he doesn't organize his entire day around waiting for a notification. What happens next may surprise you. When your attention isn't constantly available, people begin investing their own attention in you. Think about your favorite film. If you paused it right before the biggest scene, you'd probably think about it all day. Not because someone forced you to, because your brain naturally wants completion. Human relationships often follow the same psychological pattern. This doesn't mean you should intentionally ignore people or create confusion. Manipulation eventually destroys trust. Instead, the lesson is much deeper. Live a life so full that your absence happens naturally. Go to the gym because you value your health. Take that weekend trip without posting every detail online. Turn your phone off while working on something meaningful. Read, learn, build, grow. When your life becomes genuinely interesting, you stop needing other people to constantly remind you that you matter. And here's something many men discover too late. When you're always explaining yourself, I'm busy because, sorry I couldn't reply. I hope you're not upset. You slowly teach people that your time belongs to them. A man who quietly respects his own priorities teaches others to respect them too. Pay close attention because this changes everything. People don't usually remember who talked the most. They remember who made them feel something. Sometimes that feeling comes from laughter, sometimes from kindness, and sometimes it comes from wondering why someone they took for granted suddenly isn't there anymore. But this raises a much bigger question. If absence creates curiosity, why do some women move closer when a man becomes emotionally independent, while others pull away completely? The answer has nothing to do with playing hard to get, and everything to do with a hidden psychological pattern that most men never see until it's too late. Here's where the conversation takes a turn that most men never expect. Many believe women are attracted to attention. In reality, healthy attraction is often influenced by something much deeper: emotional independence. Those two things are not the same. Attention is easy to give. Emotional stability is much harder to find. Most men never realize this. The moment your happiness depends entirely on another person's approval, you quietly hand them control over your emotions. You begin checking your phone every few minutes. You overanalyze every message. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you said the wrong thing. Without noticing it, your confidence starts living in someone else's hands. Ironically, that's often the moment your natural attractiveness begins to fade. Why? Because confidence isn't just something people hear in your words, they feel it in your behavior. But here's where it gets interesting. Imagine two men dating the same type of woman. The first rearranges his entire schedule whenever she calls. He cancels plans with friends, ignores his hobbies, and constantly seeks reassurance that everything is okay. The second enjoys spending time with her, but he also protects his own purpose. He keeps training at the gym. He continues growing his career. He values his friendships. He doesn't disappear into the relationship. Which man appears more emotionally grounded? The answer isn't about dominance, it's about balance. Healthy women are often drawn to men whose identity remains intact, even while building a relationship. They don't have to wonder whether he has a life outside of them. It's obvious that he does. What happens next may surprise you. This doesn't only apply to dating, it applies to every relationship. Think about the friend who only contacts you when he needs something. At first, you're willing to help. Over time, you begin feeling emotionally drained. Now think about another friend. He genuinely enjoys your company, but he never makes you responsible for his happiness. Conversations feel relaxed. There's no pressure, no guilt, no emotional debt. Who would you rather spend time with? The answer reveals an important truth. People naturally move toward those who add peace to their lives, not pressure. Pay close attention because this changes everything. One of the biggest mistakes men make after rejection or heartbreak is trying to prove what they've lost. They post carefully chosen photos, hoping she'll notice. They upload motivational quotes that are really directed at one person. They pretend to be happy while secretly waiting for a reaction. Here's the problem. When your actions are driven by the hope that someone else will respond, you're still emotionally tied to them. Your attention hasn't moved on. It's simply changed form. True emotional independence looks completely different. You improve yourself because you deserve a better life, not because someone might come back. You learn new skills because growth excites you, not because you're trying to make anyone jealous. You become healthier because you respect yourself, not because you're competing with another man. And that's exactly why genuine confidence is so difficult to fake. It's internally motivated, not externally rewarded. This is why some women become curious when a man quietly moves forward, not because he vanished, but because he stopped seeking permission to be happy. His energy changes, his conversations change, even his body language changes. Without trying, he becomes more relaxed, more decisive, and more attractive. But here's the twist that almost nobody talks about. Not every woman reacts the same way to a man's emotional independence. Some become deeply intrigued, others lose interest immediately. That difference reveals one of the most important psychological lessons any man can learn, and understanding it could completely change the way you choose the people you allow into your life. Here's a truth that many men don't discover until much later in life. The moment you stop chasing everyone, you find out who was actually walking beside you. At first, this can feel painful. Your phone becomes quieter. Some friends stop reaching out. Certain conversations simply disappear. And for a moment, you may wonder if you've made a mistake. But here's where it gets interesting. What if the silence isn't a loss? What if it's a filter? Most men never realize this. Not everyone values you for who you are. Some people value you for what you provide. Maybe you're the man who always solves everyone's problems, the one who lends money without asking questions, the one who listens for hours but is never truly heard, the one who always makes the first call, the first apology, the first effort. As long as you continue carrying the relationship, everything seems normal. But the moment you quietly step back, something unexpected happens. The relationship doesn't slow down, it stops. That tells you something words never could, because healthy relationships don't survive on one person's effort. They survive on mutual investment. Think about a bridge. If one side suddenly disappears, the bridge collapses, not because bridges are weak, but because they were never meant to be supported by one pillar. Relationships work the same way. If your absence causes everything to fall apart, there's a good chance you weren't in a partnership. You were carrying a burden. What happens next may surprise you. This lesson becomes even more important in romantic relationships. Many men are taught that love means constant sacrifice. Give more. Try harder. Never stop proving yourself. Those ideas sound noble, but taken to the extreme, they become dangerous. When a man constantly sacrifices his standards, his time, and his self respect to avoid losing someone, he slowly teaches that person an unhealthy lesson. My boundaries don't matter. And once that lesson is learned, respect often begins to fade. Notice something about emotionally healthy couples. Neither person is desperately trying to hold the other captive. Both choose each other freely. That's what creates security, not control. Pay close attention because this changes everything. One of the strongest men you'll ever meet isn't the loudest. He isn't constantly posting about his success. He isn't trying to prove he's high value. Instead, he has something much rarer. He is comfortable being alone. That doesn't mean he wants isolation. It means he isn't afraid of it. There's a powerful difference. A man who fears being alone will often tolerate disrespect just to avoid loneliness. A man who has learned to enjoy his own company can walk away from unhealthy situations without hatred or revenge, and that changes everything because people can sense when you need them, and they can also sense when you simply appreciate them. Those are completely different energies. Need creates pressure, appreciation creates freedom. Ironically, freedom is what allows genuine connection to grow. But here's the biggest mistake you could make after hearing all of this. You might think the goal is to disappear from everyone forever. It isn't. The goal isn't isolation. The goal is becoming so emotionally secure that your presence becomes a choice, not a necessity. And in the final part, you'll discover the most important lesson of all. Why the men who quietly disappear from the wrong people often become impossible to ignore by the right ones, and how you can apply this principle immediately without manipulating anyone or losing yourself in the process. Let's bring everything together. At the beginning of this video, we asked a simple but uncomfortable question. Why does quietly disappearing sometimes make people value you more? By now, you know the answer isn't manipulation. It isn't about making someone jealous. It isn't about winning a psychological game. It's about becoming the kind of man whose life has purpose beyond other people's approval. Most men never realize this. The strongest position you can ever reach is when your happiness is no longer dependent on who texts you back, who validates you, or who chooses to stay. Because when you stop chasing validation, you finally become free to chase something far more valuable, your own potential. Think about the men you genuinely admire. They're not constantly asking for attention. They're building businesses, improving their health, mastering new skills, spending time with people who respect them, and living according to their values. Their confidence doesn't come from being noticed. It comes from knowing exactly who they are. And that's the difference. Confidence that depends on attention disappears the moment attention fades. Confidence built through discipline stays with you, even when nobody is watching. But here's where it gets interesting. The people who truly belong in your life won't be driven away because you became emotionally independent. In fact, they'll often respect you even more. Healthy people don't fear your growth, they encourage it. They don't expect you to abandon your goals just to prove your loyalty. They celebrate the fact that you have a life worth living. The ones who become upset because you've stopped chasing them, sometimes they're revealing something important, not about you, but about the role they expected you to keep playing. If someone only values you when you're constantly available, constantly proving yourself, and constantly seeking their approval, then what they loved may not have been you. It may have been the control they had over your attention. And once you understand that, you stop taking every rejection personally. Instead, you start asking a better question. Does this relationship bring out the best in me? Because the quality of your life is often determined by the quality of the people you allow to stay close. Pay close attention because this changes everything. Quietly disappearing doesn't always mean physically leaving. Sometimes it means disappearing from old habits, disappearing from people pleasing, disappearing from the constant need to explain yourself, disappearing from toxic relationships that leave you emotionally exhausted, disappearing from the version of yourself that was afraid to set boundaries, and replacing it with a man who values his time, protects his peace, and lives with quiet confidence. Imagine waking up every morning without checking your phone for validation. Imagine making decisions based on your values instead of your fears. Imagine entering every relationship because you want to be there, not because you're afraid of being alone. That is real freedom. That is real confidence. And ironically, that's also when people begin to notice you the most. Not because you're trying to stand out, but because authentic confidence has a presence that doesn't need to announce itself. Remember this: the loudest man in the room isn't always the strongest. The busiest man isn't always the most successful. And the man who receives the most attention isn't always the one who has the most respect. Sometimes the man who quietly walks away to build himself becomes the one everyone wonders about later, not because he disappeared from the world, but because he finally stopped disappearing from his own life. So before you go, ask yourself one honest question. If you quietly stepped back today, who would reach out because they truly value you, and who would only notice because they lost access to your attention? The answer to that question could change the rest of your life. If you enjoyed this video and found these psychological insights valuable, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into female psychology, relationship dynamics, and masculine self-improvement. And now tell us in the comments, have you ever quietly disappeared from someone's life? What happened afterward? Your experience might help another man see what he has been missing. Until next time, stay observant, stay disciplined, and remember, the most powerful move isn't making people miss you. It's building a life so meaningful that you never have to beg anyone to stay.